what do we call this? Is this centrality? Is this left ventricle? Just the anatomy was arranged very oddly.
Okay.
She had a restrictive ventricular-septal defect, so the hole between the lower heart chamber was not very wide, okay? And she had a very large atrial septal defect, so the hole between the upper heart chambers was very large. She also had a ductus, which is a persistent connection between the aorta and the lungs.
Okay.
And so we had to work a lot in there. We had to, reconstruct the outflow tract, and we put a patch on top of the outflow tract, and we also opened the valve, which looked good.
Okay.
And then we closed the ventricular septal defect, but rather than a closure, we enlarged first the ventricular septal defect, and then patch it and baffle it over. The aorta, the left ventricle was baffled into the aorta, but the hole was small, so we enlarged it. And then we closed the atrial septal defect and ligated the ductus arteriosus and came off. So we came off after, the heart was stopped for 194 minutes, which is about 90 more minutes than usually a tetralogy should take in.
Okay.
And everything was looking great until, as part of the correction of all we do is sometimes you have to give blood products, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because, if you're oozy, you give a little bit of platelets or, fresh frozen plasma or other blood products that are, intended to clot. So we were there, everything was looking good, and, all of a sudden, her pressure went to nothing, and she basically almost arrested, and we just had to do a little bit of CPR in her heart, gave her a dose of adrenaline, and then we just kind of waited for about an hour and a half for things to just gradually go back to normal. So I think she probably had a reaction to a platelet transfusion. So we did send that out just to make sure there's no, compatibility issues.
Okay.
But that added another hour and a half to the whole
Right.
thing. And that is why we decided not to pull the breathing tube out in the operating room like we would have if this was a regular tetralogy. So overnight, we're just gonna let her be and treat her with the respect she deserves after
Sure.
she's showed us what she can do. The good news is that we're in normal rhythm, and when you enlarge a ventricular septal defect, you can have heart block. So we're in a normal rhythm, and she's on her own. Also, she was very febrile. Her temperature went up to 105,
Oh my
which
God.
is really odd, but it's part of probably of a reaction. Okay?
See you guys tomorrow, okay?
All right.
Bye,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
So I know you know her.
Yes.
Our kids go to school together.
So, yeah, she's fabulous. It was just great there. So in any case, don't mean to tell you this to frighten you, but it's just because why we were there for a longer period of time and why we're not exactly where we want to be in terms of, moving her along. But
Has her temp come back down?
yeah, it has. It has, but
Back to normal, or is it
yeah, no,
still
it's
high?
no. No, it's no. So, but those are all things that,
Nothing Amelia does is normal.
I know, I understand. Yeah.
Literally, right
Yeah,
down
this
to
was
the
my
genetic
first,
tests.
impression,
They're
and
not
I must
normal.
agree with you. But I think the repair is okay. We did not have an echocardiogram at the end because we thought it's just a tetralogy of Fallot. We get in there, plus she's smallish, and we didn't want to put a transesophageal echocardiographic probe. And, sometimes that can cause problems with deglutition and problems. So we figured it would be okay, but we actually looked everywhere, and you get out of the OR and you know that you've done everything you needed to do. You could not do this better, and so there's no point in at that point putting a probe in and dislodging the tracheal tube. So sometimes you have to make a judgment call. So the next day or so, we're gonna probably tomorrow when she's still asleep, we're gonna do an echocardiogram, and then everything goes okay, and then we'll remove the breathing tube.
Okay.
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 So is there anything new that came up today in the repair that would anticipate future surgeries?
So, let me just explain to you how this works. So usually the aorta is like this and the ventricular septal defect is like this. On this side is the left ventricle. So if you put a patch in the front, Becky.
Sorry, can I just drop this off
Oh yeah, for tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you. Awesome, man. Thank you. All right. Yeah, Becky always knows that, I always leave this here.
You're always leaving stuff
Yeah.
behind.
So, again, the aorta is here, the ventricular septal defect is like this, right? So, if the left ventricle is here, you can see how you can actually just put a baffle in front of it, right? And there's no obstruction because the ventricular septal defect is large, right? Now, make the assumption of it, the ventricoseptal defect is small, right? So what we had to do is first enlarge it and then put a patch. Now, we also looked through the aorta from the top, and it looked good. So what, we need to, follow up over time is to make sure that there's no obstruction of this baffle. You can always go back, always make this bigger, but the nice thing is that even though we did create a ventricoseptal defect and patched it, everything that's around it or below can actually grow.
Okay.
So, as long as that happens over time, there should not be an issue. And when we look through the aortic valve, it'll actually look pretty good. So, complex repair. The pulmonary valve is a little dysplastic, which means it's a little thickened, but it's a bicuspid valve. But it doesn't look to me if there's a big gradient, and hopefully that'll grow too. We just made a little bit of a incision in the annulus to make it just a little bit bigger. But it was just kind of a complicated case, not just your usual Gardner variety tetralogy.
Okay.
And this may explain why she was not doing great.
Yeah.
Because she had a restrictive ventricoseptal defect. She could have had buildup of pressure in the left side, and the right side, she could be shunting right to left across this large ASD. So the outflow tract, paradoxically, was one of the best things that we had in there. We're thinking about saving the valve, not saving the valve. That valve actually looked pretty reasonable. This is a valve that could last a long time. But there's always a risk to reintervene. And the important thing is that now we get her off their starting blocks, and she start growing, and just if we have to redo something in the future, we'll do it. Sometimes kids with tetralogy fallot need a pulmonary valve. They develop scarring or whatever. But from what I've seen today, I would not anticipate knock on wood, intervening in the near future.
Okay.
Okay.
That's good.
Okay.
So just a long, complicated case. We're gonna let her rest overnight, let her sail through the night. Tomorrow morning we start, winning some of the things and getting her back on track. Okay?
Thank
It's
you.
all good, okay?
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Very good. All right.
Have a good night.
All right, thank you.
Will somebody come and get us when we
Yeah,
close
yeah,
here?
absolutely.
Okay.